It started with an old friend's voice on the phone. Gravelly, familiar, and just slightly too eager. "Come on, Matt. One weekend. Just like the old days. You, me, and the woods." I hadn't spoken to Owen in almost 8 years. Last I'd heard, he was living off-grid in the backcountry near the Montana-Idaho border. No internet, no social media. No one knew much, and frankly, I never asked. We'd hunted together in our 20s, back when youth disguised stupidity as courage. But now, I was 46, I had a wife, 2 daughters, a spine that reminded me of every bad fall. The wild didn't hold the same romance anymore. Still, something about Owen's voice, the way it cracked when he mentioned something big, stirred a strange pull in me. I found a stretch of land up in the Bitterroots, isolated, never been tracked. "The animals out here, they move different," he said. "You have to see it." His words hung in my mind like the echo of a warning disguised as excitement. We drove in silence most of the 6 hours up from Missoula. The truck rattled along dirt roads that became thinner, rougher, more ancient with every mile. By the time we reached the trailhead, there was no signal, no markers, just towering pines and an unnatural stillness. The first thing I noticed was the absence of sound. No birds, no squirrels. Just wind weaving between trunks like a whisper too faint to understand. It wasn't just remote, it was forgotten. Owen slung his rifle over his back and tossed me a pack heavier than I remembered packs ever being. "How far in are we going?" I asked. "Not far. 2 hours, maybe 3. There's a clearing up by Black Hollow Ridge. Never seen game like it." As we hiked, I kept glancing at the trees. They were old, older than anything I'd ever seen. Gnarled roots like grasping hands clawed through the soil, and everywhere the faint scent of iron. I didn't say anything, didn't want to sound paranoid, but I felt it. That crawling sense that we weren't alone. By late afternoon, the light had started to lose its warmth. The clearing, when we reached it, was unsettling in its perfection. A natural bowl surrounded by dense timber, no birds overhead, no insects, just that same heavy, metallic air. We set up camp near a half-frozen stream. Owen seemed at home, relaxed even, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I know how that sounds. Every camper thinks that at least once, but this was different. This was focused. That night, we sat by the fire. Owen pulled out a flask, passed it my way. "You remember that trip out in Whitefish, when we tracked that elk for 2 days and it just vanished?" I nodded slowly. He looked into the trees. "This place reminds me of that. Except here, they don't vanish. They wait." I frowned. "What do you mean they wait?" He didn't answer, just stared into the dark like something out there was staring back. At dawn, we found the carcass. It was a deer. No, something larger. Maybe an elk. But its body was twisted, half consumed, half discarded. The ribs were snapped outward, like something had torn its way out from inside. But what chilled me most was the eyes. Still intact, still wet, still wide. "No scavenger did this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Owen knelt down beside it. He wasn't shocked. He was studying it. "They don't hunt to eat," he muttered. "They hunt to watch." I recoiled. "What the hell are you talking about?" He looked up at me. and for the first time, I saw fear in his face. "There's something in these woods, Matt. I've seen it. It moves like wind, but heavier. It doesn't leave prints, just impressions, and it learns. Every season, it comes closer. You knew." I took a step back. "And you brought me here?" He didn't answer. That night, I didn't sleep. The wind didn't blow. The air just held itself like a breath waiting to exhale. Around midnight, I heard it. Not a growl, not a scream. A clicking, rhythmic, sharp, echoing through the trees like someone tapping bone against bark. I shook Owen awake. "Do you hear that?" He nodded slowly. "It's how it calls." "What is it?" He didn't look at me. "I don't know. I don't think it has a name." We grabbed our rifles, flashlights trembling in our hands. We didn't go down just to the edge of the clearing. That's when I saw them. Eyes. Dozens. Reflecting the beam of my light. Low to the ground, too close together. Watching. Waiting. I whispered, "Those aren't animals." And then they blinked, all at once. We ran, not toward the trail, not toward camp, just away. I tripped once, bashed my shoulder against a stump. Owen yanked me up by my jacket. The clicking followed, faster now, closer. Branches snapped in places no creature should have fit. We found a ridge, hunkered behind fallen rocks, rifles shaking in our grip. And then we saw one. It stepped into moonlight. Wrong. Tall, but hunched. Skin like bark. Eyes too many. Mouth too wide. It didn't make noise. Just stood there, listening. I raised my rifle. Owen slapped it down. "If you shoot it, we die now," he whispered. So we waited, hours maybe, until it turned and vanished. And when the sun rose, we didn't speak. We packed. We left. Fast. Back at my house, I tried to explain. My wife didn't believe me. My daughters asked why I smelled like blood. I didn't know how to answer. I kept the rifle close after that. For weeks, I didn't sleep more than 2 hours. Owen stopped answering calls. Then, last week, I got a package. No return address. Inside, just a piece of paper. On it was drawn a set of clicks, like a language. And on the back, a single sentence in Owen's handwriting. "It followed me home." It was supposed to be routine. Todd Menser had hunted the Bitterroot Range every October for nearly 20 years. Same truck, same tent, same rifle. He didn't do it for the trophies or the meat, though he'd never turned down a good elk roast. No, for Todd, hunting had always been a way to quiet the noise in his head. The spreadsheets, the clients, the pressure. The woods didn't care who you were outside them. That morning, as he zipped up his canvas jacket and slung his rifle over his shoulder, the cold air bit his face in a familiar, almost welcoming way. But this year, something felt off. Maybe it was how the woods didn't sound right. No bird song, no wind rustling through pine, just a low, constant stillness, like the forest was holding its breath. Or maybe it was the way his boots kept slipping in the wet moss, even though the weather had been dry all week. Little things, he told himself, nothing worth worrying about. But the way his dog Jasper refused to leave the edge of the trail, tail tucked low, ears flattened. Now that sent a shiver down his spine. By midday, Todd had gone deeper than usual. He wasn't lost. He never got lost. But even he had to admit that some of the old markers were gone. The hollowed stump near Bear Creek, gone. The rock face with the deep fissure he always used to cut west. Just a smooth, uninterrupted wall. Still, the GPS tracker on his wrist showed he was where he should be. So why did every tree look unfamiliar? Every bend in the trail feel like it was watching him? Around 3 p.m, he found blood. A thin trail of it, dotted like breadcrumbs along the base of the trees. At first he thought it was from a wounded deer. Happens all the time. But when he followed the trail, it led not to an animal, but to something that made him stop cold. A shredded orange hunting vest, half buried under wet leaves. No bones, no body, just the vest, ripped, muddy, and stained far too dark to be rust or paint. Todd stared at it for a full minute before whispering to himself, "Is someone else out here?" He picked it up. It was stiff with dried blood. The name tag was still readable, though barely. E. Corrin. Todd frowned. That name rang a bell. Then it hit him. Eddie Corrin had gone missing last season in this very range. Search and rescue had swept the area for over a week before calling it off. They said it was likely a cougar or a bad fall. But why was the vest here, clean and untouched, in a place they'd already scoured? The sun had dipped behind the trees now, casting everything in that murky amber light hunters hate. You can't trust shadows in that light. Todd's pulse quickened. He wasn't afraid. At least that's what he told himself. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. Not a bear, not a mountain lion, something taller, smarter. He adjusted the rifle on his shoulder and kept walking, every step crunching just a bit too loudly. Then the trees opened. What lay before him wasn't marked on any map. A narrow clearing with an old hunting blind that looked decades out of use. The wood was splintered, nearly swallowed by moss, but the strangest thing was the smell. Coppery, like a butcher's shop left in the sun. Jasper, who hadn't made a sound since they started, began growling low and steady, fur on end. Todd raised his rifle. "Hello?" he called out, instantly regretting it. No answer, but then something moved inside the blind. A slow, deliberate shifting, like something trying to stay hidden, but forgetting how. Todd raised his rifle, heart pounding. "I said, who's there?" Another shift, then a whisper, barely audible. "Leave." It didn't come from inside the blind. It came from behind him. He spun around. Nothing. The forest was still, but not quiet. There was a low hum now, a vibration in the air like pressure before a storm. Jasper whimpered and backed away. Todd turned again, aiming his rifle at the blind. He stepped closer. Each board creaked beneath his weight, threatening to collapse. When he finally pulled the old trapdoor open, there was nothing inside. Just claw marks on the floorboards, deep, too deep for any deer or cat. Suddenly, from the tree line, a figure emerged, dressed in a torn flannel, barefoot, mud-caked, eyes wrong, not panicked, not wild, just gone, like the mind behind them had left long ago. It was Eddie Corrin, no doubt about it. But something had changed him. Something had taken the man and left behind a shell. Todd froze. "Eddie!" he whispered. Eddie opened his mouth, but instead of words, a low growl poured out, inhuman, echoing like it came from the trees themselves. Todd fired. The shot echoed off the trees like thunder. Birds finally took flight overhead, but Eddie didn't fall. He just stood there. The bullet had hit. Todd knew his aim, but Eddie didn't even flinch. Then, as if waking from a trance, Eddie bolted into the woods with a scream that didn't sound human. Jasper chased after him. Todd yelled out, "Jasper, no!" But the dog was gone. He ran after them. Branches whipped his face. Roots grabbed his ankles. And then silence. Dead. Absolute silence. Jasper was gone. No bark, no rustle, just that awful, crushing stillness. Todd stood in a clearing he didn't recognize. In the center, a pile of antlers. Dozens of them, all cracked, all bloody. And on top, Jasper's collar. Todd backed away, but something grabbed his leg. He screamed, twisting to see a hand, bare, pale and clawed, reaching from beneath the pile. He kicked hard, freeing himself, stumbling back just as a face emerged from the antlers. Not Eddie, not human. Eyes like wet glass, mouth stretching too wide, skin stretched over sharp bone. Todd ran, blindly. He didn't care where, just away. But the forest shifted. Trails that weren't there before now split in all directions. Trees bent in impossible ways. And always, always, that whisper behind him. Leave. He tripped and fell into a shallow ravine. Mud soaked his clothes. His rifle was gone. So was his GPS. His radio only spat static. He was alone. Or worse, not alone. Something moved in the trees above. Something big. He held his breath as long fingers wrapped around a trunk, pulling a shape into view that defied logic. Half man, half elk, crowned with twisted antlers and eyes that remembered. It had learned his scent, his voice, his fear. Night fell, and the hunt began. Todd knew he wasn't the hunter anymore. He was prey. The roles had shifted the moment he stepped into that clearing. He spent the night huddled in a hollowed log, listening to the soft crunch of hooves circling, always just out of sight. At dawn, he made a break for it. He ran until his lungs screamed, his legs gave out, and his vision blurred. He burst into a ranger's station 10 miles south, collapsing on the floor, mumbling only 2 words. It's real. They found no clearing, no blind, no antler pile, no Jasper, but they did find Eddie Corrin's vest, right where Todd said it was. And a week later, a hiker snapped a photo of a creature near Bear Creek. The photo was blurry. Most said it was a trick of the light, but Todd knew better. He doesn't talk about the woods anymore. He sold his rifle, burned his gear, and every year when October comes, he leaves the state entirely. There was something different about that forest. Stan Reynolds had hunted these woods for nearly 30 years, and in that time, he'd seen his fair share of strange sights. But on that cold November morning, perched on a moss-slick log, rifle steady across his knees, Stan felt something he couldn't explain. Watched. It wasn't the usual awareness every seasoned hunter develops. This was deeper. It was pressure on the back of his neck like a hand he couldn't swat away. The fog was thick, too thick for that time of day. It clung to the branches and hovered low, curling like smoke. The birds weren't chirping, no rustling. Even the wind held its breath. Stan rubbed his gloved hands together, eyes scanning the tree line in front of him. Then, there it was, a movement. Slow, deliberate. Antlers breached the mist like the prow of a ship. A buck, towering. Its rack was massive, almost unnatural in width. But it wasn't the size that unnerved Stan. It was the way the animal stood, motionless, facing him, its body rigid yet alert, and its eyes locked on his like a man reading another man. Stan aimed, finger on the trigger, but just as he exhaled, the buck vanished. Not ran, not darted, vanished. He hesitated before moving. Every step toward the clearing felt like stepping into someone else's house, uninvited. The ground beneath his boots squelched from recent rain, and the fog rolled around his legs like ankle-deep smoke. When he reached the spot, he crouched low, inspecting the dirt for sign. There were prints, fresh, spaced wide, the stride long. It was a big animal, but something didn't sit right. The front right hoof mark was off, wider, longer, and not clean like a deer's should be. Stan's brow furrowed. He had tracked hundreds of deer, but never seen a split like this one. One print even seemed to show. Toes. He wiped his face with his sleeve, half laughing. Maybe I'm more tired than I thought. Then came the snap of a twig behind him. He turned fast, rifle raised, adrenaline firing like lightning in his chest. But there was no one. Just fog, trees, and silence, except for the faintest sound, like breathing, echoing between the trunks. He followed the trail deeper into the woods, pushing through brambles, climbing over a downed birch tree. The air grew colder with each step, and the light dimmer, as if the canopy above thickened unnaturally. Eventually, the trail sloped downward into a small hollow, and there it stood, a cabin, old, weather-worn. It leaned to one side like it was trying to crawl back into the earth. Stan's heart dropped. He knew these woods like the lines on his palms. He'd never seen this structure before. It wasn't on any map, and no local had ever mentioned it. He called out, half hoping there'd be no answer. "Hello? Anyone in there?" No reply. The windows were dark, cracked. A piece of tattered cloth fluttered from the roof like a flag of surrender. As he approached, his foot caught on something buried in leaves. He looked down and saw it, an antler, long, sharpened at the tips. Dried blood stained the base. The front door had something carved into it, deep scratches spelling a single word, run. He stepped inside. The floor creaked violently under his boots. Dust hung heavy in the air, catching the weak light like particles in amber. A table sat overturned near the hearth. A rusted lantern dangled from a nail in the ceiling. Animal pelts hung from hooks along the walls, stiff with age. But what made his stomach twist were the antlers. Dozens of them, nailed across one wall, mounted like trophies, but not just displayed. Each had a name etched underneath. Michael, Ruth, Anthony, names, human names. Stan's breath caught in his throat. He reached out, touching the base of one antler. The wood beneath it was damp, reddish, fresh. Then he heard it, a rustling from beneath the floorboards, a slow scraping sound, like claws or fingernails. Then the cry, a voice, weak, whimpering. "Help, please." Stan dropped to one knee, ear to the boards. "Who's there?" he called. The voice was barely audible now, like wind through a keyhole. "Don't let it see you. Don't look into its eyes." A loud thump from deeper in the cabin sent him scrambling to his feet. He aimed his rifle toward the hallway. Another thump. Closer. Something dragging. Something heavy. Then silence. He backed out slowly, keeping his rifle trained ahead. As he turned to leave, a new sound rose. The creak of footsteps upstairs. But the stairs were broken, rotten. No one could be up there unless they weren't using the stairs. He ran out of the cabin, heart hammering, legs barely working. The fog was thicker now, moving, breathing. Every few feet, he paused, looking behind him. He wasn't alone anymore. He could feel it, watching, calculating. That's when he saw them. Eyes. Too many. In the trees, in the brush, in the fog. Some wide, some narrow. All staring. Not deer, not human. Something in between. They blinked in unison, and Stan's knees nearly gave out. He turned and saw the buck again. It stood directly in his path, not moving, not even breathing. Its antlers were longer now, branching like black coral. Its mouth opened slowly and whispered, "Stan." He ran until his lungs burned. That's when he tripped, fell face first into soft, disturbed earth. He sat up and realized he had landed in a shallow pit. Bones jutted out from the soil like jagged teeth. Some animal, some unmistakably human. Skulls, ribs, antlers, clothing fibers tangled in roots. He crawled back, hands shaking, eyes wide. Something caught his eye. A badge. Worn, faded. David Hensley, Forest Ranger. Missing for 5 years. No one had ever found his body. Until now. Stan looked up, and the buck was there again. Standing over the edge, watching. The buck stepped into the pit, but its legs bent too many ways. The knees reversed. The bones cracked with every movement. As it moved, its body began to change. Growing, stretching, contorting. The hide peeled away. Muscles shifted. And from the mess of fur and antler emerged a face. Not animal, not human. Something ancient, something hollow. It spoke without lips. They came here to hunt. They stayed. You're the last. Stan couldn't scream, couldn't move. The thing leaned in, its breath rotting like open graves. It pressed a clawed hand to Stan's forehead and whispered, "Now you'll watch too." They found Stan's truck 3 days later, empty, keys still in the ignition. The driver's seat was soaked in something dark. The rifle lay a few feet away, bent in half like a toy. His boots were found 100 yards north, still standing upright, as if he had evaporated out of them. Locals say the forest is cursed, that something old and angry stalks those who hunt with pride. And every now and then, a hunter goes missing. And every now and then, someone hears a whisper in the fog just before vanishing. Some say Stan's still out there, not alive, not dead, just watching.